Michael met Julia in a nightclub. Everyone knew him here. He was a regular, and the girls often crowded around the guy, ready to do anything as long as he paid attention to them. "Do you want me, handsome?" I could see it in their eyes. "Why don't you and I have some fun?" Michael never missed a skirt. Often he will wake up in the morning in a bed with another girl, not even knowing her name. But it was not that bothered him in the morning hours, but a headache caused by a hangover. Every trip to a nightclub was accompanied by a huge amount of alcohol. A licentious lifestyle was the norm for Michael and his friends. At the age of 27, he was not thinking about serious relationships. And who was he going to have them with? With those half-naked girls rigging on the dance floor and the thunderous music? "Hey Michael, check out the hotties." Michael's buddy Bobby pointed to a group of girls who just entered the club. The girls were obviously celebrating some event and were looking for an empty spot in the hall. Michael would hardly have noticed them if it weren't for one of his friends. She was very different from the girls dancing on the club. Her hair was pulled back and she wore a soft pink dress that came down to her knees, like sneakers instead of high heels. "An unusual bird has flown the nest," Michael thought, and decided to make a move on the moodest girl. As he made his way through the crowd, he noticed that the girls had taken a table in the corner. He walked over and unceremoniously sat down next to the stranger in the pink dress, put his hand on her shoulder, and whispered in her ear, "How about we forget everything and hang out until morning?" The girl threw his hand off her shoulder and backed away a little. Michael got the impression that she was startled by his assertiveness. "Don't worry, kitty. I'm not going to hurt you." He pulled her around his waist, but it was unexpectedly slapped. Loud laughter sounded nearby. His friends, who had been watching Michael's ride with excitement, were already beating on whether the strange girl would go with him. "I can't remember Michael ever getting such a resounding rejection in front of me," Bobby laughed. "I think you're losing your popularity with the girls, buddy." But Michael, irritated by the girl's behavior, wasn't about to back down. He grabbed her arm and dragged her toward the exit, breaking through the crowd of dancing club goers. "Are you crazy?" he asked her once they were outside. The girl's reaction stunned him. She suddenly covered her face with her hands and sobbed, "Let me go. What have I done to you?" The girl whimpered, her frail shoulders shaking. "Hey, what are you doing?" Michael felt himself sobering up. His girlfriends never yelled. On the contrary, they always behaved in a swaggering manner, allowing the guy every freedom and smiling unwittingly. And this one stands in front of him and cries. "Come on, don't cry. I'm sorry I scared you." Michael tried to apologize weakly. It seemed that this girl was not the kind of girls he was used to being around. "Where do you live? At least, let me walk you home." It turned out that the girl's name was Julia, and she lived in another part of town. I don't know how she got into the club. It's usually just the locals, Michael thought as he put Julia into the cab. When the driver pulled up to the address, the guy asked, "Are you okay?" She nodded her head and walked toward the driveway. Michael lifted his head, trying to guess which of the apartments in this high-rise building the strange girl lived in. A few minutes later, on the 12th floor, A light came on the window. Uh-huh. So that's where you live, baby. Michael thought and let the cab go. He didn't feel like going back to the club. He walked through the city and then came home. Julia stayed in his head. Sweet, strange, frightening by Michael's pressure. She was the main character of his dreams until morning. The next day, his feet carried him to Julia's house. Children played in the courtyard. Mothers with strollers strolled leisurely. It was an ordinary residential neighborhood, comfortable for families, but unbearably boring for young people who liked to party at night. In the park across from Julia's house, he spotted several empty benches, sat down on one of them, put his leg over his leg, leaned his head back and framed his face in the summer sunlight. "What are you doing here?" Michael heard the question and opened his eyes. Julia was standing in front of him, wearing a simple summer dress and attractive flat-soled shoes. She was holding a book. I'm walking." Michael shrugged, trying to show that he was in the park by accident. "Would you like to sit down?" He moved back a little, even though there was plenty of room on the bench. Julia sat down with the book on her lap. "Did you come to the park to read?" Michael asked. Sometimes," she answered uncertainly, glancing at the boy. When he met Julia's gaze, he felt like he was drowning in her big blue eyes. They reflected the clouds, and there was no trace of yesterday's fear. "Would you like some ice cream?" Michael asked, thinking that he usually offered girls a cocktail or a cigarette. The metamorphosis he was going through surprised her. She nodded, and a minute later, he was holding out a cone of strawberry ice cream. "Didn't gentle, modest women become extinct in the last century?" thought Michael as he looked at Julia's features. There was almost no makeup on her face. Only her eyelashes were lightly touched with mascara. Her manicure was almost invisible, and her long hair was tied back with a rubber band. Noticing that the girl had almost finished her ice cream, Michael feared that she would get up, thank him, and leave, and he would be left alone at the park, probably never to see Julia again. Want to go feed the dogs?" he asked, thinking again that he'd never in his life asked a girl to feed waterfowl. "If you want to ask me out, just say so." Julia seemed to be getting bolder. "I know a great place. Let's go." The girl stood up and held out her hand. Michael jumped up in front of the bench and took her fragile, thin hand in his palm. She led him deep into the park, where there were almost no people. "Will you take me to the woods and leave me there?" he asked, smiling. "No," Julia laughed. "We are already here." She led him to the shore of the lake, stepped onto the wooden jetty, and called out, "Come on, what are you standing there for?" Julie walked to the end of the wooden dock, kicked off her shoes, and sat down with her feet in the water. Michael looked at her in surprise, and then did the same. They sat like that for a while, popping their feet in the water. "I often come here. It's a good place to think," Julia said. "What do you think about, if it's not a secret?" Michael asked. "All sort of things. I suppose you dream about a prince on a white horse." He joked, but when he saw that the joke didn't have the desired effect, he shut up again. "I have to go." Julia slipped her wet feet into her shoes. "Can I walk out with you?" Michael asked. "Let's go." They said goodbye at the entrance and agreed to meet again. Every time Michael met Julia, it was as if he saw himself from a different angle. He didn't look like he sold himself. He chose his words carefully when talking to the girl. He stopped using vulgarities as usual. He was different from his old self. He completely stopped going to the nightclub and almost never saw his friends, who openly resented him. And 3 months after meeting Julia, he asked her to marry him. No, he did not prepare, did not choose a ring, and did not order a bouquet of flowers. The two of them were at his house, lying on a bed, cuddling, watching a movie. I want you to be with me always, Michael said, kissing Julia gently on the neck. Marry me. I will do it, Michael said, kissing Julia's neck tenderly. You don't even need time to think about it? He wondered. No, why should I? I feel good with you. Michael and Julia began to prepare for the wedding. Together, they chose a banquet hall for the ceremony, discussed the menu, and what kind of flowers will decorate the restaurant, live or artificial. One evening, Julia caught Michael making a list on invitees. Here, I've written down who I want to invite from my side. You should do the same. It's time to send out the invitations, he said, handing the bride a piece of paper and a pen. I don't have anyone to invite. She turned away and started combing her hair, looking at herself in the mirror. What? Not at all? What about your parents? And relatives, girlfriends? Wondered the bridegroom. I have no one, said Julia sadly. No one at all. My parents are dead, and I've never had brothers or sisters. Michael was speechless at the news. They had been dating for several months and were about to legalize their relationship, but as it turned out, he knew nothing about his fiancée, nor did he know anything about her life before he met her. My poor girl, Michael thought. He decided not to start any more conversations about Julia's relatives. One day of the wedding, they were both anxious. Julia in a beautiful white dress with open shoulders, and Michael in a violet suit arrived at the restaurant to the loud cheers of the guests. Everyone wished the young couple well and handed out gifts, which were immediately taken to the corner, where there was a special table. There was no time to print boxes and envelopes with money. The guests danced until almost midnight, with the bride and groom dancing in the middle. They were the happiest people in the world that day. And in the morning, Julia and Michael began to bring out the gifts. They started with boxes tied with beautiful bows. Oh my gosh, Michael, look at this. Julia handed her husband black leather underwear, a whip, and pink handcuffs. Who would ever think of giving me something like this? It was obviously one of your buddies. The man laughed. Yeah, that's incorrigible. And look at this cute little picture framed with angels on it. Michael said, unpacking another box. And what have we here? Oh, a moon-shaped lamp with a remote control and 20 light modes. Nice. The newlyweds were in high spirits. They rejoiced in even the smallest things, thinking that it was not the gifts that mattered, but the fact that the wedding had gone well and that they were now husband and wife. Finally, it was time to print the envelopes. Let's see how much money they gave us, Michael muttered, gathering all the envelopes into a bundle. What's this? The guy was holding a strange gray paper envelope without any festive attributes or signatures. Michael started to open the envelope, But Julia stopped him. Maybe we shouldn't open it. It's scary. I don't know who he's from. I don't know what's so unusual about it. One of the invitees put a bill in the envelope and forgot to sign it. Michael shrugged. What are you afraid of? The man started to open the envelope, and Julia crawled closer to him on the bed. Eventually, her husband pulled out a piece of paper written in small handwriting. It was a letter. Who was it from? Julie asked. We'll find out. Michael unfolded the paper and began to read aloud. With each line, he became more and more perplexed, and Julie's face grew darker and darker. Hello, little sister. Don't expect any congratulations and wishes of happiness from me ever since you ran away from home. I have been dreaming every day of finding you and looking in your face and telling you what a wretch you are. Only a bastard like you could have a child with a sick and elderly mother. She was starving to feed your little James, and your father was beating her every day because she couldn't give him money to drink. And I have just found that you're doing fine, you witch. Well, enjoy life, but know that your mother died from living so hard, and your father put your son in an orphanage. Enjoy life. I hate you. What is this? Is it a letter from your sister, Julia? Michael looked at his young wife with uncomprehending eyes. You said your parents were dead, and you never had any brothers or sisters. Julia covered her face with her hands. She was ashamed. She had run away from home a few years ago after giving birth to a baby boy from a casual relationship. And she had wanted to forget the past, but the past had found her. And now this letter, out of nowhere, could ruin her happy family life that was just beginning. Explain everything to me, Julia. Michael asked in a hard, dry, and feeling almost metallic voice. I need to know everything about you. You're my wife. Julia rose from the bed and pressed her back against the wall. She was afraid and ashamed to look into her husband's eyes, but Michael demanded an explanation. My family's very poor. From the age of 14, I worked part-time on the streets. I got into truckers' cars and do their bidding. With the money the truckers gave me, I was able to buy some things and food. And then, Julia was silent for a moment, remembering how she realized she was pregnant. Then I got pregnant. Was it one of them? Michael asked in horror. Yes. I don't even know who. There were many of them. 3 or 4, even 5 people a day. I told my mother and my father about finding out, and then he beat me very badly. I couldn't go to the highway for a week. I had nothing to eat, and all my father did was yell around the house for my mother to get him something to drink. Michael listened to his young wife and could not believe his ears. Julie is so shy and assuming, quiet. He remembered her frightened face in the nightclub when he tried to molest her. He thought, the girl is different. And then I had the baby. There was no food in the house. I got back on the highway, and one day I just left with another driver because I knew I wasn't coming back. I thought if my mother raised me and my sister, she will find the strength to raise James, my son. How could you leave your own child? Michael seemed angry. He jumped up from the bed and paced from corner to corner in anger. Why did you lie to me? Lying, hiding your past. I was afraid you wouldn't want a girl like that. You were right to be afraid. You decided to start our marriage life with lies, with mistrust, with hiding your past. How long were you going to do that? I don't know. Get out of here. Michael stopped suddenly and stared at Julia. He imagined her blistering dirty truck drivers driving on the highways with a baby she had abandoned crying from hunger at home. I can see you. The boy went out on the balcony and smoked. He was hurt by the truth he had learned about his wife. And just a few minutes ago, they were perfectly happy and believed it will always be that way. The front door slammed and Michael realized Julia was gone. He spent the rest of the day thinking about how she had fooled him. He had really believed Julia. He admired her shyness and modesty. But she was just a dirty witch who pleased random men. Michael took a bottle of whiskey from the kitchen cabinet, poured it into a glass, and emptied it without looking away. His life, his dreams of a happy life, were shattered in an instant, thanks to this piece of paper from an ugly gray envelope. The boy grabbed the letter, tore it into small pieces, and threw it into the trash can. Night was falling outside the window. He dressed and left the house. Music was playing in the nightclub. Michael sat down at the bar and asked the bartender to pour him a whiskey. "What people?" He heard an exclamation behind him. "Decided to shake off the old days and party like you used to, huh, Michael?" He turned to see his friends with the girls and his best buddy Bobby. They were having fun as usual. Noticing that his friend wasn't himself, Bobby took a seat at the bar with Michael. "Buddy, what's going on?" he asked. Michael didn't answer right away. He just stared at the people who were having fun. These dancing people in the middle of the room couldn't understand how he felt about losing his favorite girl. His heart was breaking at the same time from the betrayal the guy had experienced and the fact that he will never see his young wife again. In just a few months, he had truly fallen in love with her. Michael had never loved anyone like that before. "Listen, Bobby, don't you know anyone who can find a person wherever they are?" he asked his friend. "Sure. It depends on how many bills you're willing to pay," laughed his friend. Michael took a napkin from the bar and gestured to the bartender that he needed a pen. After writing something, he handed the napkin to his friend. "Find it, I'm begging you," he asked. "Bobby, I will pay any amount of money, but this is urgent." "Whatever you say, friend." Bobby didn't understand anything, but he left the hall where the music was playing and took out his cell phone. A few days later, after borrowing Bobby's car, Michael was flying down the highway. He had memorized the address his buddy had given him. A few hours later, he arrived at the house where he hoped to find his wife. In the yard of a small house, a little boy of about 3 years old was playing. Quietly, so as not to awaken the child, Michael approached him and held out a piece of candy. "Hey, what's up, buddy?" he asked. The boy took the candy and looked at the strange man with pure, naive eyes. Michael straightened up and lifted the boy into his arms, putting his arms around his neck. "James, where did you go? James, don't hide. I will find you anyway." "You naughty boy." Michael's wife appeared in the courtyard. She was holding a bowl of laundry. When she saw her husband with his son in his arms, she stopped. They looked into each other's eyes, without even trying to explain themselves with words. There was no need to say anything. Finally, Michael approached Julia, holding the baby in his arms. "Let's go home," he said quietly. "We still have to get James' nursery ready and get him some toys." Tears sprang from Julia's eyes. Michael put his arms around her and kissed her softly on her lips. It took him only a few days without his wife to realize that what he had learned about her will not be a barrier to their happy married life. Also, now they will have mischievous James together.